Good evening. It's great to see so many familiar faces here tonight. For those of you who I have not yet had the opportunity to meet personally, Shalom Aleichem. My name is Yehuda Dukes. And on behalf of JNet, I would like to welcome you to this evening of appreciation. I've heard many reasons from people as to why they would sign up or volunteer for JNet. One of the more common ones seems to be, I was harassed so many times by a JNet coordinator until I agreed to do it. But we all know that the real reason why we do this is first and foremost because we're Chassidim and Shluchim of the Rebbe. And so, Poischim B'dvar Malchus, let us hear and be inspired in the words of the Rebbe, a short clip on what it means to be a Shliach. So as we see from the words of the Rebbe, we have all been appointed as Shluchim, and the uniqueness of Shlichus is that it combines our efforts with the power of the Mishaleach, with the power of the Rebbe. And so, it is a great honor for me to introduce a person that was appointed by the Rebbe to advance Shlichus all over the world, JNet's chairman and the vice chairman of Merkez L'Inyanei Chinuch, Rabbi Moshe Kotlarski.
See anything. Maybe it's better that way. You can understand. Baruch Rishayna, JNet has called this as an evening of appreciation to all of the volunteers that give so much of their time. But I believe it is my duty to, and a pleasure actually, to single out someone that Taket lives up to everything that the Rebbe said in the Sikha and took JNet as his personal shlichus and is dedicated to it, to Narbet B'Mesiru Nesina, sits in the chair and makes the calls and does everything that is necessary, assisted by Chai Cohen, who is doing it in Spanish, and Mushki Shem Tov, who helps in general. But I want to really give a yashikayach to them, and especially to Rabbi Yudi Dukes, who Pasha, this is his life. But that Klal and Lubavitch were not used to evenings of appreciation. It's a very, very rare thing that we should get together for evenings of appreciation, so to speak. Zogen yashikayach is something that Van Rebbe says, "Kol mishaiskim b'tzarchit tzibur b'amuna is nara kadosh baruch hu yishalem scharim." So I was thinking to myself, what could I say tonight? And last Sunday, my Mayenikol Siddur party, Mendel Brickman's alumni for Shleima, spoke in the name of the parents, and he told a story. And the story was that, and I actually repeated it in Miami on Monday by the dinner of the Landau Yeshiva, that there was a town, Misnagdische Shtetl, was hat gesucht a Sheichet. So came this Chassidish guy and he applied for the position, and they were impressed by the way he had gestalt a Chalef, by his Yiras Shamayim, and they were ready to give him the job. Before they give him the job, they asked him, "Where's your Kabbalah? Where's your certificate?" So he says, "I left it home." So he said, "We can't give it to you. We can't give you the job till we see the Kabbalah, that you have Kabbalah." He says, "It'll take 2-3 weeks till I get it." So he said, "No, send somebody to get it. We can't give you the job till you have the Kabbalah." 2 days later, they come over to him. He's standing in the shtetl in Avard. Someone comes over to him and he says to him, they come over, Mishlachas, and they say, we're missing a Mulamid, maybe you could become the Mulamid for it. So he turns to them and he says, Idiotim was his end. You're not ready to trust me with a chicken and a cow without my certificate, and here you're ready to take me to be a Mulamid for your children, Obschechten eure Kinder, just on my looks. And that was the end of it. You are entrusted with bringing the Rebbe's Miftzah Torah, and in many, many cases, so the Eibishten's Kinder was an Tinoike Shenishbu. People that don't have a background. I told another story that I heard from Rabbi Chadakov many years ago, that there was a Rav in North Carolina in the 30s, that he was the Rav of a city, a Rav with a long beard, a Freizeitische Rav. He knew how to pasken a shaila, he knew how to speak, he knew how to answer a shaila, wie zu sagen, advar Torah. They were paying him $8 a week. There came a younger element, and they came in and they decided that he is no good, and they brought someone from YU then, and they were paying him $40 a week. So Rabbi Chadakov tells me, he says, Edit Yikent Dem Yid, when he came to America in the early 40s, is that Rav Amol gekommen zum Friedrich Rebbe, and he met him. So he tells me a story like this, that Sheboygan, Wisconsin, was a Lubavitchish Nusachari shtetl. At the turn of the century, there were 22 Nusachari shuls in Sheboygan. All the farmers from Shedrin and Kherson moved to Wisconsin because that was the place for dairy farmers, for egg farmers, to raise cattle. One of these old-time farmers went to visit his daughter in Chicago. Came to visit his daughter, so she took him to the museum. Took him to see a museum. He comes into the museum, and what does he? He walks around and he sees a golden chicken. A gilded chicken. He takes a look and he looks so real. So real. He turns to the guy, his daughter, and his daughter turns to someone and he says, "Wieviel cost us? How much does it cost?" So the guy says, the museum paid in those years $88,000 to buy it. He takes a look at it and he's looking, and he turns to his daughter and he says, "Mädel meine, by me on the farm I have a live one for 17 cents. Yeah. The picture of Rembrandt with the bowl of fruit sold recently for $23 million. You could buy all of the fruit in that basket for $6.50 in any ShopRite or even in Empire Kosher, which it'll cost you $6-7. The fact of the matter is like this, that was the Rebbe gemeint was the Achsidische Mulamid doesn't need a certificate. Why? Because other Ahotas and Hartzen, and if he doesn't have it with his full heart, he doesn't have it at all. And we're not giving over something that's gilded. We're giving over a word from Rebbe, and you're teaching someone Aleph Beis, you're teaching someone a Posek Chumash, a Perek Tanakh, a Shtukol Gemara. You're not giving over gegildete Sachen. You're not giving over things that are gold plated and gold coated or even pure gold. You're giving over Dvar Hashem, was gekommen zum Eibishten, that the Eibishter gave on Sinai to Moshe Rabbeinu. So I want to give you the bracha that is in this week's Parsha. This week's Parsha we find that, I'm sorry, nobody ever calls me. In this week's Parsha, we find that after the Mishkan is standing and everything is in its place, Vayevarech Eisa Moshe, Moshe Rabbeinu gives a bracha to Klal Yisrael. What's the bracha that he gives? He gives a bracha, Yiratzin Shatisha Shechina B'maisa Yedeichem. May it be the will that divine presence should rest in the works of your hands. Stellt sich the Shaila, when would you want Moshe Rabbeinu to give a bracha? You ask any shliach, and anyway, when you go out to raise money, you need a bracha from Moshe Rabbeinu. You need a bracha from the Rebbe. No bracha from Moshe Rabbeinu. When you're going to make the plans, a bracha from Moshe Rabbeinu, no bracha. You have to build it, it should come in on time. Construction should be on time. It should be to the specifications that there was. It says in the Parsha this week, I think 23 times, Kashatziva Hashem es Moshe Kein Osu. It says, Aribu Piyamim. It was done on time. No bracha for Moshe Rabbeinu. Here, the Mishkan is standing in its entirety. Kashatziva Hashem es Moshe. And all of a sudden, Moshe comes and he says, I'm going to give you a bracha. Vayivarech Eisa Moshe. The only time in the Torah in which we find that Moshe Rabbeinu gives a bracha to Klal Yisrael, and we're talking not about V'zois HaBracha, it doesn't say that I'm giving them a bracha. V'zois HaBracha Shebeirach Moshe, and it goes through the Vayivarech Eisa Moshe. The Rebbe is giving a bracha. What bracha does he give? Yiratzon Shetish Shechina B'maisa Yedechem, Shrein the Yidin Gewalt. You said, V'yosel Li Mikdash V'shachanti B'seichem. Build me a Mishkan and I'll rest. We did everything the way you wanted. We brought money till you had to scream, Siginuk, Siginuk, Siginuk. We built it. It was built according to your specifications. Now you're coming and you're saying, this is what you're saying to us now. This is what we deserve after everything we did according to the way you wanted it. Now the answer to that is, I heard a Pshat Amol. It says, he writes in the Eibush, Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't talking about the Eibishter. He turned to Klal Yisrael and he said, Taki, you built it, it's beautiful. Everything is beautiful. Now may it be your will that the divine presence, that the Shekhinah should rest in what you built. It's you put in time, you put in effort, you did everything. But now what is going to come with it now? I give you each a bracha that each one of you has one JNet chavrusa. You could maybe have two, you could have three. That JNet should be a vehicle, not for the amount that there are now, but for Shishim Ribuim Yisrael. And that each and every one of you that are investing so much time into this, if them kumtach, the yashikayich for doing what the Rebbe wants from you kumt nicht. It's a thing that is b'derech memela. I don't know where it comes in the word appreciation for a chassid doing a mitzvah Torah. But the way you do it, on the yibegebenkeit with which you do it, and the follow-up that there is, the only bracha that maybe I could give you is, Yiratzin, may it be the will that in each and every person that you invest time, that each and every person that you put in your heart and your soul and your best of your capabilities to bring him to a life of Torah, to a life of mitzvahs, to advance in Torah, to advance in mitzvahs, till we the Rebbe gemont in Parshas Vayakel, could the last Tavshin and Beis, the last week before Chav Zayin Oder, I'll bring in 10 Yidden some Rebbe. I'll come now before Gimel Tammuz. Now what should Chassidim do? Everybody should be mashbiah on 20 people. So I wish you Yiratzin, Shetish Shechina B'maisi Yedechem, in that which you're doing, the Shechina should rest, and the Rebbe should be part and parcel of the lives of each and every one of the people that you're mekarev to him. They shall give him in a personal way, gesund, nachas from chassidische nachas. I once heard you don't say the word nachas alone, because Esav also had an aluft nachas that got a neinakov that gets a nachas. So when you say nachas, you have to say Yiddish nachas, chassidische nachas. To and from all of your loved ones, those that are bochrim and need shidduchim should find them, and they should have nachas, and those that need, on the women's side that need shidduchim should find them. And the rikir is, you should have a lot of money to be able to dedicate your whole life to JNet, and to be, when he makes a phone-a-thon, the teachers should be the first ones that are donating, even though you're giving so much of your time, so that we cover a good part of the budget, but Yudi covers a good part of the budget also. And David should give you Yudi, you should be matzlich, and you should see nachas that Shatisha Shechina B'maisa Yedecha. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Kotlarski, and thank you very much for giving me the privilege to be able to do the shlichus. We all also we owe a great hakaras hatov as well to the Rohr family for giving the grant which started JNet, and to Rabbi Kotlarski for ensuring for working hard to ensure that JNet continues. Thank you very much. But that brings me to the reason we're here tonight, and like Rabbi Kotlarski said, and that reason is you. Thousands of people are affected every single week on all the continents of this world. Yes, we actually had a chavrusa in Antarctica at one point. All of these people are affected because you pick up the phone or get on the computer and do your part in being the Rebbe Shliach to affect your chavrusa. Zvulun Brewer, a rice farmer from Sakon Nakhon, Thailand, can now read Hebrew thanks to his chavrusa, Eli Hanover. Sandra, a college professor in Manhattan, developed a beautiful relationship with her chavrusa, Nechamadina Zirkin, and recently, unfortunately, she actually went and had to visit her for a shiva call, and Sandra recently took upon herself to start doing Birchas HaTorah every day. So it's amazing the effect that we can have. Ben Zion Gottlieb, Olav Shalom, said that the most meaningful part of the last 2 years of his life, he was suffering from Parkinson's le'aleinu, was the time that he spent learning Gemara with his chavrusa, Rabbi Yisrael Rosen. And Richard Singer, civil engineer from New Jersey, recently celebrated his bar mitzvah at age 65 due to the dedication, and he read his Haftarah in the shul by the Chabad by Rabbi Gurkov in Wayne, New Jersey, due to the dedication of his chavrusa Yossi Goldberg. Not all of you may have experienced such amazing, obvious results from the learning, but it's important to recognize that every conversation that you have can have a tremendous impact on someone's life. An example of this, there was a young man from California who was backpacking through Peru, met a couple of Merkish shluchim who said, you know, if you're interested in Yiddishkeit, why don't you try JNet? He signed up. He was matched with a bacher here in Crown Heights. They had one conversation, and that was it. About a year later, I reached out to him and asked if perhaps the reason he hadn't gotten back was because it wasn't such a great connection with the chavrusa or something like that. And he said, on the contrary, at the time his life wasn't so settled. He wasn't really ready to sit down and learn regularly every week. But he said that one conversation that he had with that bacher, he had grown up with a modern Orthodox background and dropped everything in Yiddishkeit. He said that because of that one conversation, it inspired him, and he decided to start putting on tefillin every day again. So it can be just one conversation. Every single time you pick up the phone, every single time you connect with someone, you never know how much of an effect this is going to have on your chavrusa, and it does have an effect. And so I want to thank you so much for volunteering, and I'd like to ask everybody to please give yourselves a big round of applause for all the amazing shlichus that you do. Baruch Hashem, JNet has been growing and flourishing. We just completed our first venture into online courses, and the feedback has been amazing, and we plan on offering more online courses like these in the future. We also initiated learning campaigns for Yom Pagra, special Hasidic days throughout the year, to connect many more people to the Rebbe's Torah. We also started this year a monthly monthly raffle for the volunteers. And congratulations to Zaldi Nemenov and to Zusha Greisman, the first two winners this year. Fill out that survey this month and you might be the winner for this next month's raffle. I would like to thank very much our coordinators, Mushki Shemtov, our women's coordinator, who has been doing such an amazing job managing our women's division, and a lot of the other amazing work that needs to happen behind the scenes at JNet. And muchas gracias también to Chai Cohen. Our Spanish coordinator, who has been doing an amazing job. We now have over 220 people learning every week in Spanish, and he's also now working on providing classes online in Espanol. As JNet volunteers, we're always looking to make a greater impact, and so we decided to turn to an experienced educator who has also been a very dedicated JNet volunteer to offer us his insights into how to improve and enhance our Chavrusa experience. And so, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Rabbi Levke Kaplan.
Okay, it's a humbling experience here. So, on your tables, you have a little card to take along with you that was drafted, which from it, those are my notes basically. So, if I get stuck anywhere, you'll help me out. So, I just want to begin that generally speaking, when we talk about Torah, the feeling that's connected to learning Torah is love, ahavas Torah. While mitzvahs are something that requires Kabbalah soil, discipline, commitment, dedication, Torah is a different type of experience. It's one that we should enjoy. It's one that we should love. Some of us are raising children, and some of us are observing others who are perhaps struggling in raising their children, and one of the challenges is learning. And if we think about the fact that during the teenage years, or also during, in other words, the adolescent years and the teenage years, what happens in the child's life is that we spend most of the time learning versus Kiyum HaMitzvahs. Later on in life, our focus is more on Kiyum HaMitzvahs, while in the beginning of our life, we spend much more time learning. And that would make sense, since as young children and teenagers, sometimes we're not very fond of rules, which is what mitzvahs are. Mitzvahs are rules. They're procedures. But learning is something that everyone enjoys. So if we could find a way to have our children enjoy learning, then that balances out the limitations or perceived limitations that mitzvahs bring. I had the good fortune of teaching for a number of years at Mesivta in Olei Torah here in Crown Heights. And at the end of the year, there would be a great mesiba, a great gathering, where all the Bacharim, the Talmidim who learned by heart all of Masechta Sukkah, which is learned Legirsa in Yeshiva, there was a test, a little bit of an overview of the Masechta, and then the prizes would be given out, and they would bring a speaker to present at this event. Through the years, I would always ask myself, what is it about certain people that I met in yeshiva, teachers, bocharim, that they loved learning. And I thought to myself at a certain point that no one's born with the love of learning. It has to be cultivated. And so in effect, whenever you see someone who enjoys learning, there's someone else behind that nurtured and developed that ava to learning Torah. And in my mind, by this point, it was something that was made up. I knew that that's the way it was. Any bacher, anybody, a younger man, it doesn't matter. So here we are, we're sitting at this event at the end of the year, and all the Talmidim will learn Baal Peh, they're sitting on the dais, and then there are the Magidei Shir sitting on the other side. I'm sitting among them, and the speaker that's brought in to speak that night is Rabbi Reitport, Reb Itchela Reitport from Borough Park, a well-known Lamdan, a Ben Torah. The Rebbe writes about him, some Leilis Kayomim, who learns day and night, a mechaber of many Sfarim. And as he's walking in the door, I'm thinking to myself, who is it that gave him the Avas Torah that he has? And it's obvious that he loves learning. You start talking to him about learning, and his eyes light up. He gets so excited. He's no longer tired. He becomes animated. So he walks in, and out of courtesy, he's a busy person. Immediately the program is stopped, and the Menahel gets up and he says, we have the schus, Rabbi Reitport, and he calls him up to speak. And Rabbi Reitport gets up, and the first words that came out of his mouth, he said, my Rebbe, Rabbi Yosele Traspeler, my teacher, Rabbi Yosef Goldberg in Brunois, who was a noted Magid Shir, and he was a true Oyev Torah, and all his Talmidim, literally, every person who sat at his table walked away with a love of learning. So there was my answer. So we have this tremendous achrayus to share with our chavrusas and truth. In truth, it really is a chavrusa, because often my chavrusa says to me, "Oi, I appreciate your time, and I feel so uncomfortable, and I know you're busy, and so on and so forth, and you're teaching me this, teaching me that." And my response is always the same. It's a chavrusa, it's a partnership. I am benefiting from this more than you know and more than you are. And that's in truth the way it is. It's not just something to say, something to repeat. So we have this great opportunity to share with someone the love of Yiddishkeit in a way, there's no angle, so to speak, in Yiddishkeit that brings more joy than learning Torah. I want to share a little medrash before we go to our points that we have on the cards and talk about some practical tips that we can apply to our chavrusa sessions. So the medrash says like this, and it's a maisa, so you'll bear with me here for a few minutes. So there's a maisa with Rabbi Yanai. Shahaya Mahalech Baderech, he was walking, traveling, and Vira Adam Echad, and he encounters a person who looks very impressive. So Amalei, Rabbi Yanai says to him, "Can I invite you over? Would you come to my home for a meal?" Amalei, he replies, absolutely. Hichnise lebeisa, he brings him into the house, he fed him, he gave him to drink, and through the conversation, Bodkei b'mikra, he starts, putting out feelers if the person knows Chumash. And unfortunately, v'loi matzai, he didn't find the person to know Chumash. And then it continues, he tested him in Mishnah, and then v'loi matzai, and the Agoda, v'loi matzai, b'Talmud, v'loi matzai. And Rabbi Yanai was very disappointed. Here sits an ignoramus. And in a final moment before the end of the meal, he turns to him and he says, "At least bench for us." And the guy turns around to Yana and he says, "It's your home, you bench." In other words, "Ich kann nicht, I can't." So Yana says to him, "Can you at least repeat the words that I'll say?" So he says, "Sure." He says, "Say after me. Emor, say after me. Ochel kalba pistia de Yanai." A dog ate Yanai's meal. The guy jumped up and he grabbed Yanai and he called him a thief. He says, "You're a thief. You're holding back my inheritance." Rabbi Yanai says, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Oh, I remember I was walking by a cheder. Zimne Chode. I was passing by a Beis Suffer. I was walking by a cheder and I heard the voice of children and they said, Torah tziva lanu Moshe Moirosha Kehilas Yaakov." And he said, they didn't say Kehilas Yanai, they said Kehilas Yaakov. So you have what is mine. And so Yanai is taken aback, and they have a little exchange, and he says, "Well, tell me what you do." And the guy says, he describes two of his traits. He says, "I've never heard any Lashon Hara about someone and gone back and repeated it to the person, and I've never walked past a fight without bringing peace between the two people." And Rabbi Yana is very impressed, and he says on this person the pasuk, "V'sam derech, v'sham derech," a person who appraises his path, a person who's careful about what he does. And he says, "Sogi shave," has great value. So many who read this medrash, what they take from the medrash is, you see, not everything is learning. Here you have a person who has other great qualities that are not to be dismissed. But on the other hand, what we should also not forget is that this person, with all his qualities, he turns to Yana and he says, "Torah is mine too. I am not satisfied with my proper conduct. There were many generations in the world before Torah was given. So there is the inyan of chesed before Torah. But still, Torah is my right. No matter who the person is, no matter what Kiyum HaTorah is," and it's important to note that the Alter Rebbe has a unique approach to Torah learning that is particular to the Alter Rebbe. And the Rebbe quotes this many, many times in Hilchas Talmud Torah, whereas other poskim say that a person who's a Rasha should not be taught Torah, so lest they might use it for a negative thing. The Alter Rebbe, on the contrary, says that we should teach Torah even to someone who is a Rasha, etc., because the Moir Sheba, the light, will bring him back Lemutav. So we don't judge where our Chavrusas are holding in Kiyum HaTorah v'Amitzvahs. The only thing we know is that they want to learn, and we are the ones who have the schus to bring them the Torah, and hopefully we bring it to them in a loving way. So I want to share just a few points that we can use. And of course, we always go back to our old habits, but if we keep them in mind, at least one or two of these enhancements, as they're called on the card, hopefully we'll have a more pleasurable experience. So the first thing is, when we learn, we have a chavrusa, we should have a goal. Setting a goal, not only in that, I'm not talking about that particular session, but overall, what is it that you would like to accomplish? We heard earlier about someone who read the maftir in shul, someone who wants to go through a particular text, and it's important to guide the decision. Many times during the summer, I had this chus for many years to work for the National Committee at the Ivy League Torah Study Program, and we had an elective course, which at the second week, we had one slot where the students would choose what they would like to learn. And we slowly learned that the students don't really know what it is they want to learn. They have these things in their head, and at the second week we say, oh, what would you like to learn? Oh, I want to learn Kabbalah. I want to learn Sefer Yetzirah. I want to, something that they have no idea what it is. So, obviously, depending on who our Chavrusa is, and we have a discussion and guide them to really, yes, a vart on the Parsha is nice, but sometimes having a fixed goal of something that they'd like to achieve can be extremely rewarding. And that's all part of the Avas Torah, to really feel a sense of accomplishment, a sense of achievement. And of course, it's part of the La'olam Yilmid Adam B'makim Shalibei Chafetz. We give a person a choice. Would you like to learn this? Would you like to learn that? They've made the choice, and so on. Another thing which I think is very important and not emphasized enough in yeshivas, we have this a saying in Gemara, Ein beis hamedrash beloi chidush. It's a very strong Ein beis. It's not a beis medrash. So we have sometimes things are repeated in Torah. So we have this rule: whenever things are repeated, it's for a davar shenischadesh ba. Something new was shared. It's not just repeated the way it is. I sing sometimes, and when you sing, you repeat words. So you're taught in singing that when you repeat a phrase, it should never be with the same dynamic as the first time. So when you repeat that phrase, something has to be different. It should be softer, it should be stronger, it should be phrased in a slightly different way. So every time you get together to learn, there has to be a chidush, there has to be something new. And this really leads to the next point. That today we live in a world where many people know a lot, they know a little bit about many things. We almost never find someone who knows nothing about a particular subject. That's the nature of the world today. We know little bits of information about everything. And so when we sit down with the Chavrusa and we're talking about a Parsha and we give an overview, or we give an overview of some other, of a certain sefer or a certain topic, chances are that our Chavrusa isn't really learning much because they've heard most of what we're saying. Chidush means that we should have this intent that we're going to say something that's new. And we can understand why it is that in the Litvisha world, a pilpul or a shir, why it is that the Rosh Yeshivas make such a big deal about their chidush. Because without the chidush, then what is it? So it's really a key when we sit down to learn that there should be some innovation, something new that's being said. And if there's something new for you, if there's a chidush that you've just discovered, it will come through. And that excitement will touch your chavrusa. Another thing which, part of the chidush is also being focused. Shluchim tell me all the time that when they get up in shul and they talk about a parsha without preparing, or they give a shir on a topic without preparing, what they do is they exhaust the topic. A shliach once said to me, the worst thing I ever did was speak in shul. I gave a speech the first night of Rosh Hashanah unprepared. I spoke about every aspect of Rosh Hashanah without really getting into it, but mentioning everything. And then the next day I was left with nothing to speak about. Like anything I would say, I was already, I mentioned the Barditchever's name, and I spoke about the fish, and the tashlich, and the round, and the honey, and I covered everything, and that was it. The tzoyek and the abba, everything was covered in the first, in that first, we zero in something specific, one pasuk, an overview of the parsha, one pasuk, one mishnah, one area. You focus on one thing, and by the way, when it comes to preparing a shir like that, it's much easier. When you look at one thing, you're not all over the place. And for us, when we spend just a few minutes preparing a mishnah, or looking at a few psukim, and looking up maybe a Ramban, or whatever it is, depending on what we're learning, then we could speak for an hour. We have information. It's not like when we have to review or start scratching our heads for what we remember from when we went to Cheder. So really, that's focusing on a detail, getting something specific, is really something that I find very effective, bechlal, with shiurim in general, and especially when you're talking to someone over a phone, where you have to really zero in and focus. Balance is very important as well. As adults, we really don't like to do any rudimentary work. It's hard to sit with an adult and practice ivra, reading. I was learning with the chavrusa. At that time, we were using Skype, and I sent him Gemara linear translation, and I really insisted that he should read the text inside, and he had very little practice reading Hebrew, and it was very challenging. So I knew that I can't demand that all of whatever we're going to read, he should be reading inside, and then I'll just explain. So we said, you know what will it be? How many lines? How much of the text? But have some of it. So you have a little bit of time that he spends, working, reading, trying to gain some kind of skill. Focus on the inside, and then the discussion. So you have the balance. You have a discussion question, perhaps. Then you have ideas that you share. You have a story, but there's a balance, not just discussion without any grounding. So however you feel comfortable dividing a shir. For me, usually it's in thirds. 20 minutes or 15 minutes spent spread through the class on working on the reading, just being connected with the text, 15 minutes of discussion outside, and then 15 minutes of that grueling exercise of, just learning the form and practicing the words, and so on and so forth. And I'll just mention this. I taught in 8th grade also for a number of years. I'm always looking for the age, what's the right age. So at different years, different classes, you do different things. So at a certain point, I took the Gemara of the week, so to speak, the Gemara of the week, and I put it down, and this was an amazing story, just to share with you what happened. It's just amazing. I was at a bar mitzvah, and the Rebbe's kapitel that year was Kuf Gimel, and the father of the bar mitzvah turned to one of the kids in the class and asked him to come up and say the Rebbe's kapitel. And I was there, and I was devastated. It was very embarrassing. It was terrible. And this was a student who I had never noticed that they were weak in Kriya. They would daven for the Ummud and daven loud. I didn't realize it was all memorized. And I was so bothered by what happened, I decided the next morning, I came into class, I distributed cards that had the Rebbe's kapitel on the back. I had a picture of the Rebbe on one side, the Rebbe's kapitel, and that was it. Every morning, the kids, we would say it going through the desks. I would start at a different point every day, pasuk by pasuk by pasuk. A kid said the pasuk, everyone repeated, the next. Maybe 3 weeks into this practice, literally 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I look up and I see that the kids are no longer looking in the cards. And for those of you who are not familiar with Kapitel Kuf Gimel, I ask you later tonight to please look inside. The Ivra is difficult, and it's not a short kapitel. And I turned to a kid and I said, "Why aren't you looking inside?" He says, "Oh, I know it by heart." I said, "Really? Since when?" He says, "Oh, for a long time already." Look, I knew when the bar mitzvah was. It was just, a couple of weeks. And really, in a short while, in a few weeks, by just very simple practice of reading the word and repeating it, the kids all knew it by heart. And I tried it the next year, and I tried it the next year, and it worked every time. Long kapitlach. In a few weeks, less than a month, the kids knew it bal peh. So when I realized that, I started with the Gemara. I did the same thing. I took the Gemara, I made it like psukim with nekudis, and every day, before we did anything else, a kid would read the word and everyone would repeat. Read the line, read. By the end of the week, they were singing it according to the pshat, and it was amazing. Just 1 week of reading the Gemara inside. So for us, the greatest challenge is really getting the chavrusa or the student to look into the words. We're so intimidated. There's such reservation. We don't want to look in. Just tell it to me. Talk to me. Tell me by heart. I'm too old for that. No, it's not loyre chaykahi. It's not so far away, and it's so rewarding. And finally, the greatest joy in the world is when we could share something. And when we summarize a shir, and we say, here's a takeaway from what we learned today, and that's something that our chavrusa could share with a family member, with an aging mother, with a child, that is the greatest joy of learning. When a kid comes home, and they could tell their parent what they learned today, I learned this, I learned that. That is the greatest joy. Sharing is the greatest joy. In the Litvische Welt, there's a chabura practice, which I haven't seen here, where Bacharim get together on Thursday night, and they have a time where they sit together and they discuss what was learned. And really, that's the goal. That the friends share, it's without Gemaras. They share the things that they learned. It's the greatest joy possible in learning is to share ideas. You ever notice, you walk in and you see two people sharing, they learned a sikha, and someone says, oh, such an amazing, so beautiful. Another one says, yeah, and this sikha, there's such joy when you share the ideas in the Torah that you learned. So that's really the great gift that we end off with. And again, all of this with the intention that we're able to instill the Avas Torah in our students. And the Eibishter should help that we should have great Hatzlacha. I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you, and thank you, Rabbi Yudi, and it should be with much, much Hatzlacha.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Kaplan. I know that I will definitely benefit from some of these tips in my Chavrusa experience as well. So thank you very much for sharing them. I just wanted to thank everyone who helped make this event tonight a possibility. Rabbi Shalom Ber Baumgarten from the Jewish Children's Museum, Torah Cafe, and Yossi Rubin for the video. Yisrael Silman, and Danny Fernlich from GEM. And a very special thank you to Chava Namdar, who put in a lot of work into making sure that this event tonight would be a success. Thank you. There is a special gift for all the volunteers as a token of appreciation for your dedication. It's the new book from GEM, Seeds of Wisdom. You can pick one up outside. We had, I don't know if you saw before, we had Yossi doing interviews. If you have a minute to just say, a little bit, your name and the person you're learning with, and why you do JNet on the video camera, it would be very beneficial to help get other people to be inspired to be involved in JNet as well. So please feel free to pick up, for all the volunteers, one of these books on your way out. Feel free to also stay and have a little more food if you didn't have a chance to eat something yet. We hope you enjoyed the evening, and we hope that we will complete our shlichus and be zoiche zu sehen sich mit den Rebben im Heirav Yameinu.